Good morning to all of you in this lovely Friday, the 1st of December in 2023. It is great to welcome all of you again as we get to our very last webinar this year. It's been a great year. And thanks a lot for having been with us. That is to the audience, and welcoming all of you as well. And as we close this year, we really thought that we will have a conversation on good governance being the anchor to successful, I won't say only local government, in as much as I'll say the work study or the experience that one of our panelists will be sharing this morning is more based on local government. But if we look at it, it's a model that can be replicated in any sphere of government, even the private sector for that matter. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Zonyane, the chief editor of the Municipal Edge. In the panel today, I've got Mr. Bazil Vink, who will basically be leading us on the presentation. Also, we've got Dr. Harvey from Good Governance Africa. Without really wasting time, because I know Bazil, and welcome, it's gonna be an interesting conversation, especially looking at the success of the Western Cape municipalities, because this is where it emanates from, and also for the benefit of our audience, to really start to look at how did Western Cape municipalities got it right to working together with other partners within the value chain of government, but most importantly, how can that be replicated to other provinces as well? I think the conversation today is more around that. And again, Doc, given the work that Good Governance Africa is doing in the continent, your experiences and also what can be drawn from what Western Cape has achieved up to this point in time. Without really wasting time, welcome again to our audience. As you know, if you've got questions, you've got comments, we've got the chat box, we've got the question and answer session. We will try by all means to get to the questions and the comments and your inputs, because these conversations, without you really, it can't be through conversations. On that note, Bazil, my friend, welcome, and over to you.
Good morning, Zitze. Good morning, everybody, and thank you very, very much. I'm going to start sharing my presentation. I'm also just going to switch off my video, otherwise so that it don't impact on the presentation itself. So firstly, thank you very much, everybody, for joining, for the invitation to Future Cities presentation. Really, this is just, it's the first day of December. Many people are ready to go on holiday. And really for you to join us really says a lot about commitment to government and to the people that you serve. This presentation, Zolani, Chairperson, is actually very opportune as well, given that we had our 2023 cycle of audits in local government ended yesterday with signing off of reports by Auditor General. Some might still have issues and continue. But now is the time to make a difference if the focus is of improving good governance and thereby improving audit outcomes. Now is the time to really look at lessons learned and then be able to apply it in your environment and thereby making a difference. So this presentation is about good governance and anchored to successful local government. And we all know if local government is successful, it means our people are successful. So my presentation is talking about Western Cape reflection, and particularly taking it back in terms of the strategies that we research developed from 2006 to about 2017, and the impact that that has shown within the Western Cape. Chair, the presentation very quickly. We're going to talk about short introduction, highlighting some of the Auditor General comments, looking at some of the current realities. Leave the audience with some improvement strategies that, if it's not applied within their organizations, they can look at the lessons learned from there. We all know why municipalities exist, Chair. In terms of the Constitution, Section 152 speaks about the objects of local government. And it's clear that the responsibility on local government to provide democratic and accountable government, very important, democratic and accountable government, and to ensure the provision of services to communities in a sustainable manner. And we will reflect on that important part of the Constitution as we go through the session as well. And through that all is also to promote social and economic development, where our families, our children can feel safe to walk around in our places where we live, have parks and have clean drinking water from a healthy perspective. And further to encourage the communities and community organizations to get involved in matters of local government. Program director, we know that is often lacking. That communities sometimes do not get involved in matters of local government. You have poor attendance of ward committee meetings, when there's public participation going out, and it's important to educate and to get the communities really involved in the matters, and it is family members. Important also is that the municipality must strive within its financial and administrative capacity to achieve the aforementioned objectives. Very important. In 2014, Minister Gordon called a meeting in Pretoria, which I attended, where he was concerned with the audit outcomes. And, said that we were late to that meeting, and he turned to me and he said, "So Western Cape, you seem to get it right. So what are you doing that's so special?" My reply to the minister at that point was, "Minister, it is about just focusing on the basics." And a few months later, we had the back to basics strategy coming out. So that's essentially what we particularly focused on, and I'm going to talk about that. The AG in the 2021-22 consolidated report forward highlighted that local government faces greater demands than ever before, particularly to regain the trust of South Africans and to provide essential services such as clean water, sanitation, electricity, waste management, and well-maintained roads and infrastructure. And we can but drive around our hometowns and we can see how many municipalities are still failing in this. We had water issues out in the Pretoria region. We have many areas where water supply is cut off for days. I'm not even going to talk about it. Should have been eradicated many years back. Electricity, I think we're in stage 6 now, and luckily I live in a place where we don't have load shedding as the chairperson, but I believe people are suffering at stage 6 load shedding right now, and businesses are closing. People are losing livelihoods because of these things, and those are the realities, and this was in last year's forward, Chair. The way you highlighted that for years, local government has been characterized by deteriorating standards of living. Our people's standards of living is falling, service delivery failures, dysfunctional municipalities, I mean, even within our metros these days, you have almost on a monthly basis, you hear of a vote of no confidence in the leadership. And that doesn't bode well for governance and the communities that we ought to serve. Council and administrators in municipalities is a regular occurrence, as well as service delivery protests and the crumbling of infrastructure chair. This is what we see on a daily basis nowadays. We're going into elections, so it's going to be silly season over the next 12 months, where we're going to see an increase of service delivery protests. And as much as we often look at it and we get upset with these things, it's also the people's constitutional right to demand services. Local government was created, and it's things that we as stakeholders, as leaders in the various municipalities and organizations, just need to take our calling serious and to work with communities in terms of dealing with some of these issues. Unfortunately, Chairperson, this has also become a reality these days, where municipal officials and managers, the walks, arresting people, and we've seen it more often. On the one hand, it's sad because these are people in trusted positions, and they should be serving the communities. So on the one side, it's a sad occurrence. On the other side, it also gives comfort to others to know that the law will prevail, that impunity of people acting as if the coffers of a municipality or whatever public sector organization is theirs, is really heartwarming when these people are held to account. Because they're in position of trust, and so therefore we should not be having this. We should have a zero tolerance on people abusing the positions that they occupy within government, within local government, in public sector as a whole. Chair, in terms of report, it highlighted National Treasury assessed 112 municipalities, 44%. And they're operating with unfunded budgets. They overstated their revenue projections, and check here, the revenue will not be collected. That is what was found in a study. Some municipalities even can't pay the creditors to spend the over, and that is one of the key triggers of financial distress when municipalities have unfunded budgets. Program directors, I don't need to tell you about this. You've been in this environment for many years, so you've seen it firsthand as well. And that most of these municipalities with these budgets are experiencing various degrees of financial problems. They're also spending money which they have not budgeted for, and that's why you have this ever-increasing unauthorized expenditure being reported by the Auditor General. And like they said, in the 2021-22 year, unauthorized expenditure of 25.47 billion rand, with the 13.03 billion as non-cash items. And that essentially means that the municipality spent money that council had not provided for and only poses an imminent threat to sustainability on municipalities, but it perpetuates a spiral of non-delivery as there's no money. In terms of going concern challenges, Chairperson, 70 the financial position of 70 of the 241 municipalities to fully operate in the future. The key to this is ESCOM debt, water board debt, and that is also linked to not delivering services at the required level. 56%, 217 municipalities found for distress, which is a key concern. Where by year end they found that 52% of the municipalities owed creditors more money than they had in the bank. The total deficit in local government for the year amounted to 11 municipalities spent more money than what they generated. And we all know what that means. I mean, we all have households, we all have responsibilities. We cannot spend money that we don't have, because then we're going to start borrowing. And at some point in time, that will also run out. And then that spiral will just take us totally down. And as a result of this happening in municipalities, some were actually starting to use budgets planned for the next year to cover current year expenditures, which shows the deterioration of local government finances. And this is per the MFMA combined report 2021-22. So if I come to the talk for today, the untold story, reflecting on Western Cape Treasury Journey 2006 to 2017. ZZ, I need to take the story back, a few years to the actual genesis of our focus on good governance. So the Western Cape government, actually prior to about 2006, we worked on a government governance framework. It was the first of its kind within provincial governments and for government specifically. So during 2008, it was formally adopted by the then cabinet. And that framework recognized the complexity of the very concept of that corporate governance or governance holistically. It recognized that principles such as transparency, accountability, fairness, and responsibility are universal in application. You know, it's not different in the Western Cape than it would be in Johannesburg or Gauteng or Eastern Cape. It's universal. This framework particularly also built on initiatives that was existing within the provincial treasury and the provincial government in improving audit, risk management, internal controls, and resource utilization. So it basically contextualized at that point that service from at that point where I was involved, the Western Cape province had to be delivered in accordance with the spirit of the Constitution of South Africa. So all of those objectives that we spoke about earlier for local government, so that was when we involved in local government from a support perspective. It was also then a key requirement to ensure compliance to the legal frameworks and consequently contribute to appropriate and timely responses to often critical needs of the public. So this government governance framework also then had its definition that we particularly rallied around in development of was providing stakeholder assurance. So the community is out there, businesses out there. So we provide about providing assurance that the abilities that what we do are applied in such a manner that the objectives, remember objectives is what we agreed, whether it's through our IDP or whether it's through our strategic plans or annual performance plans. We've communicated what we would like to do. What is it that communities can expect from us? And so that applied in such a manner that objectives, promises will be achieved effectively. Basically, we're doing the right thing. And economically, it's going to be fair. It's going to be fair across everybody, economically in an agreed ethical environment. It basically says we agree the value statements or the value compass we're going to use as we journey in delivering of these objectives. So this was the definition of governance for us at that point in time. And this definition then particularly guided how we went about that. We then developed a governance, a government universe. This was for departments at that specific point in time, where we said, you know, we're talking about planning, objective setting. We're talking about abilities. So when we talk about abilities, we putting people in place to do what we planned we're going to do, and then we said we provide assurance. So these will indicate whether what you planned, what you're doing, is aligned to the expectations, and all of this then needs to happen within a values and principle based system. And this was then designed around to look at what are the values and the principles we will be driving. And then, of course, we unpacked the environment itself. You say, looking at what is the control of our environment we want to look at. Through it all, and you're going to, chairperson, you're going to see at the end how it all start to come together. So we were then looking at to say, you know, what is the governing culture in an organization? Is the ethical and moral values? Are the staff committed to what they need to do? We focused on enterprise risk management because risk management should be at the heart of everything a municipality does or an organization do. Because if you know what can go wrong, you can put controls in place to prevent anything from going wrong. But even more so, Chair, there's sometimes positive risks that needs to be considered as well. And those are then linked to that. We focused on information and communication, communicating to stakeholders, how information are collated, how communication are done, internal, external, and whether there's norms and standards that needs to be around that. From a controls activities perspective, we particularly looked at, as per the definition earlier, or the focus was to drive compliance around the legal frameworks, and it can be in any place. This time, at this point when we drafted this, it was for PFMA or provincial departments at that stage, but it can be, it's universal, it can be applied universally. And then a key area was safeguarding of assets. That includes your bank, your cash, you know, your other assets. So it was important to focus on safeguarding of assets. And we then linked it to monitoring, whether it's financial, operational, or compliance monitoring. So this was around about from 2006 to about 2008, where we framework. This framework was also then particularly supported through a understanding of people, process, system. Some use technology in the end in place of system, but we said nothing can be done without having these three firstly present and balanced. You know, if anyone is more invested on than the other, then your balancing of your system will not necessarily result focus. So the key thing was that when we talk people, we said there needs to be the appointing of the right person for the job. We at that time used the word fit for purpose. Chairperson said it. Don't know if you can remember that still, but it was about appointing people that are fit for purpose. Job description and performance management must be applied to some degree. When we said we focus on processes, we needed to say that, you know, are the policies and procedures in place? Are delegations implemented off by relevant officials? Are SOPs developed and implemented to make sure that people are doing the right thing? And if people leave, there's sustainability. You know, your organization will not fall flat. From a systems perspective, there was a key focus around ICT governance ICT systems, do some massive investments around MSCOA, support to municipalities, guiding municipalities, supporting municipalities to make sure that the financial systems are able to support the business. And then particularly also looking at, are people capacitated on the systems, the usage of the systems, and are the safeguards in place? We now today hear a lot about hacking of municipal IT systems. You know, are there safeguards in place? Are firewalls in place? You know, all of those things. And are people, you know, staff using the systems with that in mind? You know, in terms of not just plugging in any device or accessing any website that's untrusted. And those are things that particularly is important for municipalities to also look at. That was 2006 to about 2008. So through that, my team and I were all in terms of clean audits. So the genesis of clean audit started in 2009 when the late Minister Sitega basically had a vision by 2014. At that time, 283 municipalities and 9 provincial departments in South Africa will have clean audits in their financial statements, and they will be maintaining financial systems and management information. This is what they call a BA, you know, a very hairy and audacious goal that the then minister had in 2009. And we can see that although the vision, yeah, it was totally unrealistic at that point to call for 283 to achieve clean audits. So prior to this, we particularly monitored, we worked on municipalities, and we worked on from a financial governance review and outlook perspective. So at that time, we researched a control-based self-assessments, and we particularly followed the Canadian model that was used by the Canadian Auditor General at that time to guide their organizations to financial maturity. And it was then to assess the maturity capability on an annual basis to perform an assessment by PT in financial governance, accounting, and SEM. And then we would have gone into rating. And then also we had a financial management improvement program, which focused on the audit action plans, and which were primarily also with a retrospective focus in terms of dealing with some of these matters. So 2012, we worked under PSO 12, which said we wanted the Western Cape at that point wanted to be the best run regional government in the world. The AG report 2011-12 showed the stagnation of Western Cape municipal outcomes. And as a result, it was negative public perception towards local government and provincial government in terms of how they manage their administrations. So post 2012, we went into our new strategy, which was the MGROW strategy. It basically was the Municipal Governance Review and Outlook, which is a bit different. Now you can hear by the name, it's not only looking at finances, it's a bit broader. It was then the assessment, municipal assessment, that was based on the Canadian model. It was to guide municipal management capability maturity within municipalities to drive a single-minded focus on clean governance and agreed upon common goal. So Chairperson, if I can just quickly stop there. The Western Cape made a very important decision that we were not going to drive clean audit. Clean audit was not our focus. Even when it was called Operation Clean Audit was not our focus. Our focus was to instill and drive, and consequently thereof, to then achieve clean audit status. And there was a key focus to align and to support national and provincial strategies and objectives, and to move from being to have a retrospective focus to become more proactive, to use data more intelligently in terms of support provision, and just looking at it from a risk perspective and managing any risks within the value chain that we were supporting. So the strategy was formally adopted by the principals at PCF, November 2012. The mayors were present at that engagement. So again, the strategy objectives was to promote good governance, drive a single-minded focus on overall and organizational-wide governance. So again, it's not only financial, it's much broader, that it informed the collaborative effort required by municipalities, the Treasury, and the Department of Local Government, our sister department, our then sister department, and the executive management team, to get the commitment to address government efficiencies with available resources, focused on monitoring and support of municipalities by both PT and Department of Local Government, as we realized, doing it in isolation of each other is not gonna yield the desired results. So therefore, integration, cooperation was of critical importance. Assist municipalities to improve municipal governance, financial management, and service delivery to communities. As a consequence, as I said earlier, as a consequence, achievement of improved audit outcomes by all municipalities by 2014-15, which was also a very audacious goal at that point in time. Our foundation, clean audits must be accompanied by tangible achievement of performance and delivery targets. That was a key focus of the then Premier, where she said, clean audits mean nothing if there's no service delivery. So there was that part that you had to accompany clean audits with tangible achievement of performance and service delivery target. As I said, no genuine clean audit without service delivery, and a focus through collaboration. The people must feel a difference. The people must see a difference. You always hear the conversation, when people visit from other provinces and they drive on Western Cape roads, it's like, wow, we're in a different part of the world. The focus had to be on creation of public value. You must feel the difference of government wherever you go. And that's essentially the foundation that was there. What did the strategy bring? Chair, you must just watch the time and guide me if I go over. Benefits of improving from the strategy itself. It improved and strengthened relationships with 30 municipalities and the Western Cape government. It made it easier to access information that assists in the development of response strategies to address municipal failures. I mean, I'm involved in local government across the country, Chair, and it surprises me when I get to places where management reports is not shared, where municipalities become so close-handed about that information, but yet you are to support and you are to assist with development. There's still that lack of trust in many regions, where that information sharing, the freedom to share information is not there. We particularly also focus on collaboration between role players to address the challenges. Some of the challenges at that time that we dealt with was SCM Regulation 44, piloting of electronic reporting systems, standard set of key performance indicators, expenditure charters, budget-related policies, BTO structure guidelines, risk and internal audit, shared service pilots. So there was a lot of work that required collaboration between many role players. and our business was primarily as a result of collaboration, hard work between CFOs, personnel within both Treasury, Department of Local Government, and other departments, and it was through that collaboration. It was then to have that common goal and say, where is it that we want to take local government? Some municipalities, of course, didn't want to participate. But even still today, those regions are still, you can see it when you read the auditor reports, which are those regions that still didn't want to share information or be part of a strategy. So it was about the collective focus by all role players in terms of optimal performance. We particularly, for us, conformance was not enough. It was not enough just to conform to what the law required. The SCM team focused on developing of one supplier database, focused on red tape reduction. I mean, most have heard about these things. Improve compliance, efficiency towards strategic sourcing and spending. A lot of good work that was done by our then SCM unit, and I know that they are still doing excellent work. Z's investigations in terms of revenue strategies, and revenue protection, as even as the AG said, the only way for those municipalities that are in financial distress with unfunded budgets is to find additional money, which means that they need to investigate alternate revenue strategies, and actually protect the revenue that they have now. Many municipalities don't do that. They don't bill what is, they don't do proper billing. They don't follow up in terms of credit controls. And those are things, and the credibility of the revenue environment is often questionable. And those are the things that can make massive differences to those municipalities. Also, focusing on long-term financial plans was a key focus, to not only get our municipalities to a status of good audit outcomes, but also financially viable. And then we developed support recommendations from municipalities. Our support programs was informed by the data from the municipalities and going through analysis of documentation. It was also informed by engaging with municipalities. It wasn't us two municipalities, but it was actually a collaboration around that. So our training programs were informed about what came out of our MGRO findings, and establishment of help desk, special focus on accounting and SCM matters that also assisted at that point in time. Identification of risks in terms of the self-tool, effective utilization of forums. Our forums functioned on a quarterly basis. We had excellent forums. All our municipalities participated in our various forums. And it wasn't to say, they would come there, they would sit down and not participate. All our municipalities participated. All our municipalities took the discussions that came from those forums. And it was just around creating a benefit of peer pressure amongst each other, competition of achieving the clean audit, every year when they met their chairperson there in Canal Walk with the award ceremonies, you could feel the competition in the room, and it was good. It was good. It was a good type of peer pressure. And then also, the key was the improvement of maturity levels, and ultimately municipalities unqualified outcomes or clean audits that then was achieved. Just quick around the process, it was just to look at the governance maturity model to provide a framework of governance maturity 1 to 6. This is what we developed based on our COSO framework. And to give you a progressive guideline in terms of improving your maturity within your organization. Most of the municipalities within the Western Cape were way past, pure compliance, or the level 3, what they would say, data. They started to use modeling for decision making, which was quite impressive for being part of that kind of progression. So the model focused on improving capabilities of municipalities. It provided for assistance. It required a lot of honesty, because in some cases people felt, that their performance will be measured against that, which we try to allay the fears. Because if you the self-assessment will give exact ability to hone in on where the problems are and what needs to happen to just a quick timeline on how our engagements work. We had a strategic engagement normally here around about September. That is where our provincial government will go into our tabling of our planning. And so it's important to have a strategic engagement here so that whatever we need to be informed about can influence what we plan and ultimately our budget going towards April. Our M-Group 2 was in February, March, which was more a tactical type of engagement. So this one is strategic. This is where the municipal managers, the heads of, same with Department of Local Government at that point where I was part of, and the MEC of Finance often attended most meetings that I were part of. So you can see the nature of the strategic type of engagement. And that meetings we also invited key from the community, key stakeholders. In some areas we invited places where there weren't chambers, we invited other maybe SMMEs that needed to share their story. So we gave them an opportunity to share their story. That also then provided advice to the people present in terms of decisions going forward, what people might need going forward. And then in M-Group 2 was tactical. This was where we particularly look at your mid-year assessment. Audit action plans was just done. The audit was just done. So municipalities had to prepare the audit action plans. We would have analyzed management reports as well as audit reports. So in that engagement, we will talk about what needs to happen towards June to either improve or to maintain. And in that meetings, often also the mayor of the relevant municipality might be present along with the management team of that municipality. So that is just in terms of the cycle. There was continuous monitoring, support collaboration throughout the year. We then had our LGM Tech 3 engagements, May, that's looking at the budgets, the draft budgets. And normally we issued revised M-Group criteria June, July, depending on, we wanted to be the best regional government in the world, which means we constantly had to do comparative analysis and update and revise where it was necessary. And then, as I said, December, we do the analysis of the management letters and audit reports. So the M-Group 1 theme, just to give you an idea, was a strategic engagement. So the focus was always on sustainable local government, where we said we wanted to meet the needs of the present without compromising the future. And that is creation of public value. We were not going to try and meet present needs through long-term loans that our children will have, particularly some of the key focus, the themes that we often had in this meeting. As we said, the elements that we focused on for sustainable government, we said we needed to focus on governance sustainability. So there is councils that functions, you have your assurance functions that are number one, appointed, established, and functional. So councils meet, leadership are in place, they're appointed fit for purpose, MMs, CFOs, management teams. So a key focus was around governance sustainability. Then we needed to look at financial sustainability, which particularly looked at budgets, funded budgets. Whether the municipality have funded budgets, whether they have financial plans, long-term financial plans in place, their revenue strategies, their expenditure management, where expenditure management is applied. So those were typical things that we looked at from a financial sustainability. We looked at the financial indicators that were particularly. We then also focused on economic sustainability. In this area, we looked at it from a SEM perspective. Your functionality of SEM governance, your committees, your 3-committee system, whether you have a policy focused on, dealing with irregular expenditure, if there is, and what is happening within that space. We also looked at it from an economic perspective in terms of economic development. I know the budget office at that time published the municipal economic review and outlook on an annual basis at the level of a district that provided guidance from an economic perspective to those relevant municipalities. So it guided how municipalities and management then make decisions in terms of their municipalities pertaining to economic and so on. And then the last one was about public value creation. So all of that is it creating public value? So that was looking at the annual reports, unpacking annual reports. Even our Miro became important there as well, as it gives some indications on year. Can give you a year-on-year indicator of how that district is faring. So it's about public participation, whether those things are happening, and so that was the key elements that we drove from a sustainable local government perspective. This is just very quickly a high-level overview of how the strategy impacted. So by 2015, we had 22 clean, in 2016, 23 municipalities clean audit, 2017, 21. Then it dropped a bit, and it's now picking up again, clean audits. And what did we do, Treasury, during this time? We particularly supported on an annual AFS consistency assessment and workshops. We attended the audit steering committee meetings where we provided that, we obtained the draft AFS from municipalities and did a high-level review that was normally around about 15th August. We assisted municipalities in terms of accounting, audit, and laws in any regulatory matter. Reviewed the annual management reports and audit reports, as I alluded to, back informed our tactical engagement during January. And we also reviewed the audit action plans. And then we provided regular information through the various provincial forums. Chairpersons, you guys chaired the CFO forum and the MAFs. So there was a IDP forum, which particularly looked at performance management and focused on the auditing of performance information. We had a Chief Audit Executives Forum and a Chief Risks Forum, which particularly focused on the provision of assurance, risks within the local government value chains, and the provision of assurance to those different organizations. And that's essentially what we had. This is just the elements in how we present, going to economic, create public value. And this is how it then looks linked to our current issues of fruitless and wasteful expenditure, where the governance area is dealing with those ones. Consequence management, are your impacts functioning? Do you have disciplinary boards established? And it was also then dealing with capacity building and making sure your assurance functions, internal audit and risk management is functioning within those municipalities. Dealing with unauthorized, looking at it from a financial sustainability perspective, efficient budgets, working on that you have funded budgets, focusing on cost containment. And also an area that we looked at was cost of compliance and budget and revenue management. Irregular expenditure, SEM, focusing on the governance of SEM, the preventative controls within the SEM environment, not to have non-compliance to legislation or your SEM policies, and the risk and audit activities within the SEM space. Drive a single-minded focus. In your organization, you must have one vision that is driven and supported through a clear valued system. That what you do must be aligned to support national and provincial and municipal strategies and objectives. You must focus on improvement and strengthening of relationship, drive collaboration between all role players, ensure collective focus by all role players in driving optimal performance, and then focus on developing support programs that are responsive to the needs and expectations. Effective utilization of forums, even if you're just attending a forum, I always say that I've always found some benefit of attending a forum or a meeting. I've heard people say, but I just wasted my time going there. Then I say, but you didn't listen. Because I've spent almost 30 years in public sector now, and I still learn something at various forums. Because the day you believe that you know everything is the day that you should rather exit the system. So effective utilization of forums. Do not attend to go and walk around and have a holiday. It's about listening, it's about learning, and it's about coming back and applying what you've learned. And peer pressure is always good. This is also just taken from the Auditor General report, just speaking on the planning and monitoring report process within local government. What you do must align to the National Development Plan 2030. We have your medium strategic framework that outlines government's strategic 5-year plan for the administrative. We then look at your oversight, parliament, provincial legislature, and councils. Out of that, we have your policy development, and linked is your 5-year IDP. That is very important. And then only it comes into your municipality through strategic planning. So I've got this vision for 5 years. How are we going to achieve it? That links into your strategic planning. You then plan for it, you apply specific performance indicators. You often have your year, people arguing in municipalities about, when they get audited on performance. But what you plan, it's within your control. So you cannot blame the AG if they come and they say, but your indicators isn't smart. Those things you should apply and keep in mind when you do your planning. So essentially, you then do the planning, you then execute in terms of that plan, in terms of you're setting your goals and you do what you have to do, and then you get into your in-year reporting. So you need to submit your quarterly reports and submit it timeously. Those things then needs to be assessed and checked. And towards you getting into your annual report basis, and then you need to deal with any shortcomings that may be was evident through that value chain. And this, in a nutshell, is it's just almost the governance arrangements of a municipality in terms of that. So what would I like to leave municipalities with, Chairperson? Municipalities must drive and institutionalize a culture of compliance and controls. You must assess and monitor SEM, preventative controls. That means to basically eradicate or reduce irregular expenditure. So risk management and internal audit must be key partners within SEM processes. If they're not, you, the head of SEM, get your risk manager to come and meet with you first thing on Monday. Get your head of internal audit to come meet with you first thing on Monday. And let them guide you and see where the loopholes are and provide you with that level of guidance and advice. Ensure the functioning of your public accounts committees to deal with the wrongs of the past, to investigate, and if they need to recover. If it needs to be written off of the proper investigations, and a functioning disciplinary board. Each municipality must have a functioning disciplinary board, and consequence management must be applied. We must move away from the notion of just writing off things when people should actually be held accountable, and that is something that needs to be focused on. Ensure the implementation of standardized accounting practices. For me, in this phase, many municipalities utilize consultants to prepare financial statements, but yet many municipalities with those consultants are every year having bad order house to paint the house or do whatever. You will not be happy if that is not done to the expectation, because you are paying for it. Likewise, municipalities should start keeping consultants accountable for their delivery. So I've paid you for a service. If there's an issue with that financial statements, and a consultant didn't do what they have to do, then sure, then a municipality must deal with that. Accounting officers must ensure proper record keeping and document control. I mean, I've been through many audits, and particularly because documents are just not provided. We know, Chairperson, we know RFI 1. RFI 1 today will be the same RFI 1 next year. So why is it that some municipalities do not provide all the information as required in RFI 1? It boggles my mind, because you can actually prepare that RFI information well ahead of time. And so it's those kind of things that municipalities and particularly accounting officers need to look at. People charged with responsibilities of reconciliations must review reconciliations regularly. CFOs, BTO managers, they must perform the reconciliations on a regular basis, not to come year in and then try and sign off reconciliations because the age is coming. Your registers must also be reconciled. Many municipalities have found one thing around the asset registers, which is of key concern, and they must regularly perform independent reviews and reconciliations of accounting records, and then ensure the Chairperson. That is from me. I thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, BV, as I usually call you. And thanks for gracing us with your presence this morning. As I hand over to you, Doc, there are just a few areas perhaps that I also want to emphasize, because having worked with Bazil and the team in the Western Cape, as I've said, the critical takeaways for our audience and also those who will be accessing this particular recording. One of the things that the Western Cape Treasury working together with the Department of Local Government in that particular province, was more to say, and it was more based on the complaints from municipalities that you guys from the province, you act as big brothers. Sometimes you don't want to listen to us, you impose instead of finding a way in which we can be able to work together. I think even before 2006 BV, for me, that was one thing that provincial government working with municipalities on the collaborations that you are referring to, we got right. The second point, which also, it goes to the maturity of politics, as we usually call it, to say some of the things, for them to change, it's that maturity that is required. As you might have all heard, Bazil, that the strategy itself, which is the government governance framework, was a work of 2 years between 2006 up to 2008. We all know in 2009, there were local government elections. And the party that was in opposition up to that point was the one that assumed governing the province. And guess what? When that political party came in, presented with a strategy, it was never to say, we will start our own. The political leadership looked at what was presented and they liked what they saw and they ran with it. I think that was one very critical thing that really contributed much to this particular success. But I think I'll make other points, Doc, as we go along, and also for the benefit of our audience. And again, our chat box is open as always. Question and answer option is also available if you've got some questions and inputs and comments. Now, turning to you, Doc, and also based on, I would say overall, Good Governance Africa as an institution, but also having worked throughout the continent, and I would say worldwide, perhaps starting with the South African context versus the success of the Western Cape, whether perhaps isn't it high time for other provinces, and not only to look at a Western Cape as another country, as some people often refer to, even myself at times, but what can be learned from the success of the Western Cape, but also emulating that to the continent, but also your insights, Doc, as well, in terms of our municipalities within South Africa, our provincial and national departments, looking at these kinds of initiatives. How best can they be emulated? Can they be institutionalized within our institutions to ensure that we get the governance, the leadership components correctly? But as I give it to you, Doc, just an apology, because as you were presenting BV, we had some connectivity challenges, but we managed to pull through. But again, it goes back to your presentation as well, because if we had good leadership, good governance, we will not be having ESCOM at the state that ESCOM is at today. Doc, let me hand over to you just for your inputs so that we can be able to take this conversation forward. Thanks a lot.
Great. Thank you, Zolani and Bazil. Well done. Fantastic presentation. So as Zolani indicated, my name is Ross Harvey. I run the research division at Good Governance Africa. We're an applied policy research think tank. We've been in existence for 10 years now. I've been heading up the research division and working at GGA since May 2020, so nearly 3.5 years now. And essentially our theory of change, and this coheres with a lot of what Bazil was saying, is that if we improve government effectiveness and empower citizens to hold their governments to account, we have essentially two arms of governance, two relatively independent arms of governance, working together to create an enabling environment for private sector dynamism to flourish, for private investment to flow in and for jobs to be created, and so on. But this element of government effectiveness is absolutely critical, and it's a function of being able to control corruption, having good regulatory quality, rule of law, proper consequences, proper leadership and management, because that all leads to the creation of real public value. And I love Bazil's definition of that it's meeting the needs of the present without compromising the future, the needs of our future generations. One of our flagship products, or assessment tools rather, at GGA is what we call a governance performance index, where we measure the performance of local municipalities. In the last iteration, 2021, we excluded district municipalities. We will be including them in our forthcoming edition, which will be released in March next year. And so we had 8 metros and 205 local municipalities. We've been refining that methodology to make sure that we get closer to representing a kind of true picture, and we don't have anomalies and kind of strange things. But we've learned quite a lot that really does dovetail deeply with what Bazil's been presenting. And so first up, just to say that we measure municipal performance on 3 primary criteria. That is service delivery. As Bazil rightly said, if you go into a municipality, and even if you go into a province, you should be able to tell the quality of the governance just by how it looks and feels. So if the grass is cut, the potholes are fixed, the buildings are properly kept, you know immediately that there's something being done right. And that's, municipality could get a clean audit, but that's not a sufficient condition. It's probably a necessary condition to ensure proper service delivery. It's probably not a sufficient condition all the time. The sufficient condition is often a function of leadership, and that leadership and that the people element of the people, processes, and systems that is actually competent and qualified and capable enough to ensure then that the right systems and processes are put in place to enable effective service delivery. So we focus first and foremost on service delivery. We then look at planning and monitoring. Again, the quality of planning really matters. So we've enhanced our methodology to not only check, obviously, whether municipalities have IDPs in place. Everyone should, but in some municipalities, you'll find that an IDP is drafted by an external consultant who doesn't have any skin in the game. And that IDP may not actually be properly informed. There may be no real connection between the allocation of resources and meeting the objectives of the IDP. And then monitoring. I mean, Bazil did a fantastic job of just showing how important it is to monitor where you're at. If you don't evaluate on the basis of your monitoring what you need to change and how you might need to reallocate resources or prevent wasteful and irregular and fruitless expenditure, then you're on hiding to nothing. Our third criteria then is administration. Obviously, you don't want billing crises. You really need to make sure that your administration is functioning properly. Okay, so that's the GPI. Look out for it. It's coming next year. Of course, you don't want to just rank municipalities for the sake of it. We're trying to develop a true picture, and it's not meant to be a stick. It's actually meant to be a means by which we then say, look, there are things one can do to improve performance, and a lot of them are embedded in what Bazil presented. and that is really, if I could say it in a nutshell, it's about getting your people and your processes and your systems correct. There's fantastic architecture for this kind of thing. But then, Zolani, to answer some of your questions, what we notice is deteriorating quality of political leadership and a complete abrogation in some areas of what should be a politico-administrative divide. So some of the engagements we've had in the Western Cape, you'll hear Western Cape officials saying, look, we can't even engage with municipal management forums in other provinces because the officials are politicians and vice versa. And now that should never be. He raised this brilliant point that, and Zolani, you mentioned it actually, that if you do have a politico-administrative divide, then your administration can present strategies to whichever political party happens to be in power. And now, of course, a mature political party will actually listen and learn and maintain a politico-administrative divide that will allow the strategy that's been developed by technocrats. I don't mean that in a narrow sense at all. I mean by people with expertise to actually then go ahead and deliver. Now, when you have a deteriorating quality of political leadership, that tends to influence the quality of the municipal leadership team. And so we've noticed a very stark difference on that level between the Western Cape and the rest of the country. And I think that really has to be transformed. There are lessons to be learned from the Western Cape. You know, it shouldn't be seen as a threat or big brother or any of that kind of thing. The Western Cape has done well, and it's done well not just because it inherited relatively good structures, but because it's actually managed its assets properly. It's taken care. It's had confidence in the good of what was bequeathed to it, and it's made it even better. And you do notice the difference. We travel fairly regularly out of the Western Cape, and our head office is in Johannesburg, and you notice that because of the volatility in political leadership in Joburg, for instance, service delivery is not there. It's not happening. Zolani, then lastly, just to your point about the rest of Africa, we are looking to expand the GPI into other regions. Of course, it's methodologically challenging because South Africa is relatively unique on the continent in the way that its municipal structures are set up and established. But I think the point in the end is that there's much to learn from the way in which the Western Cape has succeeded. I think the emphasis really does have to be on the right people who are capable enough to put the right processes and systems in place, and ensure then that architecture is actually adhered to. And ultimately, it's got to be about the creation of public value rather than the extraction of rents. And I think what you have with the deteriorating quality of political leadership, especially at municipal and metro level, is an attempt to extract rents rather than to genuinely produce public value. So that's kind of where we're at. You know, Zolani, you rightly mentioned Eskom. We see this in our SOEs as well. You know, there aren't consequences for messing up. You know, and that's got to change as well. I was at a conference recently, actually moderating a session where Celia Brink, the mayor of Tshwane, was speaking, and he said, look, firstly, one doubts whether a clean audit is actually always clean. And secondly, you know, sometimes your qualified audits, or sometimes you have municipalities that get unqualified audits, and service delivery is shocking. So you don't want to only utilize audit information as your benchmark, but even then, municipalities that don't receive clean audits don't seem to care. And that comes down to this issue of consequence management. There do have to be consequences, but having said that, there has to be much more of an emphasis on improving institutional capacity. That's got to be the key driver. I think I'll land it there for now, Zolani. Thanks for inviting me.
Thanks a lot, Doc, for those inputs. And indeed, they also, I'll say, elevate between good governance, leadership, and also we talk, I'll say, capacity development. And in the recent past, there is a push towards professionalization, which is also going to be a question that I'll be posing to you, BV, on professionalization, given the vast experience that you have, I'll say, across the country. But also to touch on something very important in adding to this conversation that we are having. Because earlier in the year, I happened to participate in a South African Local Government Association seminar on talent management. And almost every speaker that came up, be it from political leadership or administrative leadership, the issue of acquisition of this talent or skills that we are talking about, to say, if we are to get it right, it must start at that level. It's no use we don't focus, be it when we elect the political leaders, we don't look at the skills, the capabilities, and everything else that needs to be there. Similarly with technocrats, if we disregard the minimum requirements, for an example, at acquisition, then that's where the problems start, and that's where perhaps we can do a lot in trying to rebuild, I would say, our government. And again, one thing I would say the Western Cape, and now I'm also sharing the experience, because when we started, Doc, with this series and Bazil, we then said, for this year, let's move from just putting the ideas on the table. Let's come up with conversations like this, where practical solutions or how other institutions are getting it right, so that we can manage to learn from each other. So we said, let's move from ideation to action. And that's the only way that we will be able to address some of the challenges. And as part of that, between the Western Cape Provincial Treasury and the Department of Local Government, specifically now on capacity development. And again, it's about those collaborations that Bazil was talking to. Those two departments, out of their own budgets, they've got funds being transferred to municipalities for the purpose of building the capacity that we're talking about. There are relationships and collaborations with institutions of higher learning, which also the municipalities are using. So that alone, based on the skills assessment or capacity assessment, it then becomes also easy to identify those areas that need attention, to identify those critical officials that needs to be upskilled in terms of their capacity. You've also mentioned, Doc, something also that resonates with the Western Cape in terms of, yes, we are talking about service delivery, but I want to take it to cleanliness. Because I've got many people, specifically now that I'm in Gauteng, they'll go to the Western Cape, be it for leisure, be it for work. Even if they go to other towns in the outskirts of the city of Cape Town, there's one thing that is common. Why are those towns so clean? And it goes back again to a decision that was taken by provincial government to say each provincial department that can contribute positively, not only on the function of a municipality, but the outlook of a municipality. That led to a Department of Environmental Affairs in that province introducing a grant. At the beginning, it was Greenest Town grant. It then evolved to Cleanest Town grant. So those minor, it could be minor because even those funds are not really that material, but the impact that we see on the basis of that decision, that's how I think the thinking needs to shift even from the provincial departments. Those that constitutionally and otherwise they should provide support. There is a need to go back and think to say, what type of support are we talking about? Because there can be many of us as provincial government, as national government, to say we are providing support to municipalities. But the question should be, what type of support and in what form? And it must be a combination. Because again, looking at the Western Cape, Bazil will attest to that. We even called it hands-on support. It was not just support. Where we went to municipalities, we sat with our counterparts, and having broke that steel wall in terms of the big brother approach, we saw each other as a team, which worked well because when I called my counterpart in a municipality, they didn't think twice to pick that call because they knew there was value in that call. If I say, I'm coming for a visit to discuss specific issues, it was never a case of, no, we are busy, won't be available. They always welcomed that type of engagement. But then, as I give to you again, BV, I'll just go to the comments as well after your input. On the question of professionalization, because we've got various, I would say, institutes. If I can quote a few, the Chartered Institute of Government Finance, officers, auditors and risk officers, which is SIGFARO. We've got, as I've indicated, the South African Local Government Association. We've got another institute, which is the Chartered Institute of Audit Governance, Oversight and Leadership, and many others. There is a drive on professionalization. You listen to the Department of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs. So BV, you've worked across, I'll say, the country, dealing with various officials at various levels. Do you think and believe if we were to professionalize local government, as we say, would we then do a dent? And how best can we go about that? Because I'm raising that, Bazil Doc and the audience, because if one can look at these institutes, for an example, that I've mentioned, you look at the membership to those particular institutions, they are far, 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 far less than the public servants that we have. Which then again says that there is a lot that needs to be done. So BV, if we are to take the professionalization, as we are saying, that it is critical, it is important, and probably even modeling it from the Western Cape as well, as I've indicated on the capacity development initiatives, how best must the country, let me not say can, because it's something that must happen, how best the country must approach that professionalization and not only leaving it to certain institutes or certain particular departments. Bazil?
Yeah, no, thank you, and thank you everyone for the session. Zedget, I think our strategist, Tony Manning, who said that we as South Africans are good in planning, but we are very bad in executing. And that links to the importance of people. So you can have the plan, but if you don't have the people to execute that, You can have the most beautiful plans, you will not achieve anything. So therefore, people are critical for the success of local government and government holistically. And linking to your question around professionalization, ZZ, you know, I spent many years, I've been working in 3 provinces now currently, in the support of municipalities. And I've always stressed the importance of growing your own timber firstly. So young people and interns is of critical importance in many municipalities and organizations. They are the future of local government. So it's important to get them properly. And I think that's where it all starts. And then of course it's about the leadership of municipalities or organizations, that the right people are put in the right places. And remember, I've believed in continued self-development. I've studied my first degree in the early 90s. And I would say most of that I studied in the early 90s is totally absolute or continuous development. And that's where your professional bodies become very important. So I know, you know, many years when I joined local government, you couldn't become a CFO unless you have attained a certified financial CFA, or it was differently named then. So you couldn't become a CFO without that, and it meant that you had to go through a training process and a vetting process to get that registration, and it was specific to the environment that where you were supposed to work. So therefore, for me, professionalization is of critical importance, that people become members of the various organizations. But then the organizations must also, you know, do their bit in terms of supporting of members. I know SIGPA is doing a lot around things and so on, which is quite driven by the need of local government, which is excellent. So I do think there's important need for officials to become members. I know sometimes people raise affordability as issues, but self-development is important. Then even around the support being provided, you need to understand local government to support local government. So if your staff have not worked in local government before, they need to be capacitated in understanding local government, how it works, what people go through. You know, I often tell colleagues that, you know, you must understand what an MM goes through at the municipality before just saying, you know, they're non-responsive or they don't want to do something. You know, it's about understanding the environment and the context that your counterparts work under. It's like you also said, for us at Western Cape institutions of higher learning, particularly the universities, was key to the success of capacitating our municipalities and officials through the programs that we rolled out. So it's also about, you know, government and treasuries to engage universities within their regions and developing programs. You know, our programs was informed by our MGRO information or what we learned, what was happening in local on the ground, and that informed our training sessions through the USB at that point, as well as all the master classes that we designed for our municipal counterparts. So really, I would say, Zed, if I can leave one thing, we must invest in people. And that is the only way local government will be successful. Thank you.
No, thanks a lot, Bazil, for that. And for the purpose of, I'll say, stable connectivity, because I realized even on my side, when I turn off my video, at least I could hear you better as well. And the people, because you put it correctly to say it starts with the people, which is correct. And until we've got that investment in building those skills, in building that capacity, and in contributing to good governance and leadership, it should start there. And when we talk about people, it should not only be focusing on the technocrats, as Doc referred to earlier on, but also those in political leadership. There is a lot that still needs to be done at that level in building that particular capacity. There was a comment that came earlier on, BV, in as much as it was more complimentary, but I think it's important just to read it out, and also for the purpose of those who will be following this the recording from Umbusi Zikalo. Thank you, Bazil, for the great and informative yet challenging presentation. And I think there are many in the audience who resonate exactly with that. It certainly inspires hope and a compelling future. And again, that was the idea, Doc, Bazil, and the audience, when we conceptualized the theme for this year. It was more around how do we use that which we already have, that which we know, to basically reshape what the future should be looking like. So comments like this one, number one, they attest to the fact that this conversation that we are having, it will have a long-lasting impact to many people who will be listening to it. But most importantly is, how do we share the experiences? How do we share the expertise that we all possess? Because as these professionals, for an example, we possess various skills in various areas, but then bringing those together, it becomes quite important. As I'm about to go to the question that has come through, and also I wanted to link it back to the Western Cape in terms of collaborations, because one of the greatest things that also, I would say, Bazil, assisted the Western Cape Provincial Treasury in being innovative in its thinking, because every strategy, which is a 5-year strategy that got introduced, Western Cape Treasury and local government in that province were well ahead in terms of those strategies. As you've made mention of the back to basics, it was soon after you made a point in one of the national forums. But one critical thing within Western Cape Treasury in terms of the structure, because you are having a situation where the municipal teams are across various programs, like we've got your program 2, your program 3, your program 4, that deals with various aspects within program 2 being the issue of budgeting. For an example, you go to program 3 and 4, that's where the bigger frame of financial governance, that will be your internal audit, your risk management, your supply chain, you name them, are sitting. But what has happened? What has happened was more working as a team within those programs, the coordination that took place, the respect amongst the colleagues, because for the success of Bazil, there was a dependency from other team players from across other programs, which then contributed to the success, as I've indicated. But again, having a thinker, an innovator like Bazil, because personally, and I know other people might argue on what I'm going to say, the success of the Western Cape municipalities as it relates to the audit outcomes being one of the many measures. I don't think Bazil that could have been pulled through without your tenacity, number one. And again, I'm mentioning these things also to thank you for the patience with the people like us who used to question everything because we wanted to understand. And again, that type of a relationship within the department, even before going to other departments, as I've indicated, the relationship between Western Cape Treasury and the Western Cape Department of Local Government. And at the beginning, the Office of the Premier taking ownership of these particular strategies. I think that was great, and other provinces can also learn from that. I see Doc has also answered the question that came from Isaac van der Merwe. And again, for the benefit of the audience and those who will be following this recording, Isaac posed a question starting by saying, in terms of urgency, is there a room to involve a private sector to take over the basic services on a limited period contract with at least 4 explicit outcomes? Number one, restore the financial flow from the resident or municipality to the service providers and the municipal management. 2, the development and delivery of human capacity. I think we've touched on that, to deliver appropriate levels of services after the contract period. And number 3, the establishment of infrastructure and equipment and delivery of these after the contract period. And number 4, the development and deployment of systems and technology to manage the municipality. But Isaac closes by saying, thanks for the opportunity to participate in something positive. It then links again to what I was saying earlier on. This has been the idea from the beginning to say each of these conversations, they must have a positive impact on how we transform, firstly, our government functionality, but most importantly, how do we then use that to transform our communities? And in answering that, I'll give you, Doc, I know you've typed, but I want to give you an opportunity just for an oral response to these questions that Isaac is raising. But also, I'll give you a bite as well, Bazil, for inputs on these questions.
Yeah, thanks, Zolani. Yeah, I'm keen to hear from Bazil. I totally understand and resonate with the question. My sense would be that number 2 and 4 are actually the keys. I am generally reluctant about private sector takeovers, just in general, because what you have in some areas, especially under-resourced or under-capacitated municipalities where, for instance, mining companies come and establish an operation, is that the municipal management team starts to see the mine essentially as the de facto municipality. And so they don't then invest. You know, there's almost a perverse incentive because they know that for the mine to have a social license to operate, it'll provide services. Now, that shouldn't happen, but it creates this perverse incentive for municipalities to perhaps not invest in people, processes, and systems in the way that they should. So in those particular instances, you definitely want better integration between the social and labor plan requirements of the MPRDA, the Mineral and Petroleum Resources Development Act, and the municipal IDP. And I think that these kind of conversations are not happening sufficiently. I mean, they happen in some of the rooms that I'm in, but I think we need a kind of more national conversation around this, because it's not only in mining areas. You go to a place like Grahamstown, I'm sorry, I forget its new name, and then you find that the local Pick and Pay is paying people to clean up the streets and whatever. That's not systemic and it's not sustainable. So I think that whatever you do, if there is going to be a short-term so-called takeover, it should be on a kind of very short substitutionary basis, but with an explicit view to putting systems, people, and processes in place and building up capacity that is going to work that temporary intervention, as it were, out of a job. You really don't want functional kind of substitutions to take place, because in the end that's bad, say for the mining company or for the local Pick and Pay or whoever it is. That's not their job. But what you do want to do here as well is have a conversation about potential ring fencing, because we don't have a systemic or sustainable way, as far as I read it at present, to deal with the difficulty of municipalities having essentially unfunded mandates. And in areas where it's difficult to attract talent because of remoteness or lack of opportunity or whatever the case might be, then you do want to think about how to do things differently. Either mechanisms you can put in place to attract the right people, or just innovating with intent. So on that note, I'm super keen to hear from Bazil what he thinks, because there are places in which this kind of question is difficult to answer.
Yeah, no, thanks. Zeta, if I may, I totally agree with Doc. I'm reflecting on a PPP discussion. I was part of at a conference not so long ago, and a member from the banking sector or the World Bank indicated that businesses, private sector, is in business to make money. That are in financial distress would not be something that they would look at, that they would get involved in. They will not go and build a water purification, invest in water purification if the money for the revenue side is not flowing. And most municipalities where these issues persist are municipalities that have going concern issues, that have financial sustainability issues, that often in financial distress, which then means that the way I see it, the private sector will be very reluctant to get involved in taking over any of these services where people are maybe not paying their accounts, or a limited number of people are paying their accounts. I often see communities taking charge of some of these services, like Dr. said, cleaning the streets and in front of their houses, and sometimes filling potholes, but it's not necessarily a total service being taken over by private sector, and there's a legal framework to govern around that. I want to put a counter that, as I alluded to right at the beginning, we need to get active citizenry where communities hold their leaders accountable, and where we then are able to ensure that the people within are there for the right reason. We need to get more active. National government, who is often a key funder of these municipalities, will then also need to play a much bigger role to make sure that the political leaders and the administrative leaders are then doing what they need to do. I know the legal process is quite long, ZZ, to go into intervention state, but we should be able to start researching wheels coming off sooner rather than to try and get the train back on the track after it has left the rails. Then it's more problematic and more issues that you have to deal with after the fact. So I think we need to find ways and means to deal with that, Doc Ross, in terms of from indicator perspective to see, here we're going down a path. Let's arrest the situation before getting to just moving services to private sector is not necessarily going to be the best outcome for communities per se. Often services are being rendered at a big loss. I mean, I've assisted the municipality not so long ago where we looked at tariff setting, and looking at that municipality, the delivery of the water was almost 50% less than what the actual cost to deliver that water was. So communities are and private business is not gonna do it at a 50% loss. And that is some of the realities we just need to keep in mind and find ways and means to deal with the problem rather than to move the problem and getting somebody else to fix somebody else's problem.
Yeah, Basil, I totally agree. I think that's a super intervention. And Zolani, if I may, I just want to reiterate the call for an active citizenry. The thing is, you have to have emphasis on improving government effectiveness on the one hand, but you need it to be coupled with an active citizenry that is empowered to hold its government to account. One of the interesting pieces of work we did at GGA was to try and understand the relationship between governance performance at municipal level and political stability. And we found that, as you might expect, that there is significant quantitative evidence to show that improved performance does lead to more political stability. Now, that doesn't mean fewer protests. It just means fewer incidents of violent protest. So you find in better governed municipalities, there is more active participation and there's increased voter turnout. Now, for me, that was very encouraging to see that improved performance doesn't lead to less engagement from the citizens. It leads to more engagement. But the thing is, you don't want this to be a unidirectional relationship. You want to make sure that government effectiveness is improving citizen engagement, and you want to make sure that citizen engagement in turn is actually operating in that, or at least serving as a mechanism for improving accountability at government level. And so I think that, part of the whole drive to improve people, processes, and systems is to also improve participation. We say at Good Governance Africa that the three pillars of good governance are transparency, accountability, and participation. you really do need to provide channels through which citizens can engage. We're also building into the GPI for next year, just so everyone is aware, an interactive tool. It won't count for a large portion of the overall weighting, but we wanted to give municipal management teams an opportunity to engage and provide feedback. But part of the question, part of the questionnaire will be ascertaining what kind of citizen feedback they enable. And then that'll give us an idea of the kind of leadership being exercised, especially with a view to participation, not only transparency and accountability, but because we're interested in getting these two arms of governance to work together. So there's a thought for you, just perhaps it's something that can be built into the way that we do things. But yeah, overall, definitely, Bazil, I think we don't want to get into a situation where the private sector is basically left to do everything as it is. Private sector is under massive pressure, as you rightly have said, and you probably, people in the audience will have noted the very negative noises being made by VW, who have been a champion for maintaining motor manufacturing in the country. But when you have companies like VW under pressure, or Implats who've just had a terrible mine accident and the platinum prices are under pressure, this is terrible for the fiscus, and that means, in the end, that the transfer of funds from National Treasury to local municipalities will be impaired. So we need to remember, just at a national level, to make things as attractive for the private sector as possible, and to attract at the same time responsible private sector investment. But again, they can't be a substitute for the kind of deficiencies we're facing at local municipal level.
Thanks a lot, Doc. Thanks a lot, Bazil, for comprehensively answering the question that came from Isaac. And I'm glad you both touched on the issue of active citizenry or community participation. And I believe that also addressed your follow-up questions, Isaac, on that particular subject. But also in probably adding on that particular aspect, because when I engage at various levels, it could be with officials, it could be with public representatives, I always paint this picture to say, if you talk of a municipality, for an example, it has got three very important legs in it. At the top, being the citizens as the shareholders. Then you have the council or the public representatives. And if you look at that in a form of a private entity, that would be your board. Then you've got your technocrats under the leadership of the accounting officer. So indeed, many citizens and many communities somehow they have taken a backseat in terms of fulfilling their role in that type of a structure that I have painted. And getting over to, as we are also getting to towards the end, and I'll give our panelists their closing remarks. On the issue of the private sector taking over, Isaac, that will be dangerous in so many ways. I think both Doc and Bazil have alluded to that. There are two things that I would like you to note. The Auditor General's report, you can take the past two reports, three, and even the coming one. It's not going to paint a different picture when it comes to consultants supporting municipalities in reporting. And again, if we look at what AG expresses in terms of the quality of the work and related aspects, it therefore says we might think the private sector is a solution, but perhaps we might still have challenges. And secondly, on the legislative framework that also Bazil referred to and Doc referred to, we've got what we call public-private partnerships. If we were to get the triple Ps right, some of the issues that we are raising could be addressed through that particular legislative framework. But again, either there's less of appetite, or when it is done, it is not done correctly. So those are the basic things that we really need to fix, even before we can say the state has dismally failed, therefore private sector must come in. So those are some of the comments that I thought maybe let me put forward just to amplify the inputs made by Doc and Bazil in your question. But as I hand over to you, Bazil, first, in terms of your closing remarks, firstly, thanking you for availing yourself in delivering what many of our participants in the audience see it as valuable. I'll pick two which I intentionally left out when I read the first comment. The first one came from Oliver Josie. Well done, Bazil, on the MCRO strategy. Indeed, a great achievement. Support your views on back to basics. And there was also another one that came from Kolis Noila. This is good. How I wish that our municipalities can emulate these strategies. And as I was saying, that's the whole point of these conversations, to say, from the experts or those who have got a know-how, how that expertise gets transferred or shared with other colleagues or officials, also to ensure that other municipalities, other provinces, even national government, take away the good from these strategies, so that there is a way and a space to basically implement or infuse these strategies in the planning, but also ensuring that those that are good are basically infused or elevated to that national importance, so that they can be implemented throughout the country. And I'll take one example on that one. I'll give you Bazil shortly. The issue of the financial management maturity capability model. It was started by the Western Cape Treasury, as you indicated earlier on, but National Treasury has taken that up to ensure that all municipalities do apply the model in terms of turning the situation around. And as we close, your closing remarks, BV, and then it will be back to you, Doc, and then I'll then close thereafter. Take it, BV.
No, thank you very much, ZJ. Let me firstly thank yourself, Dan, for the opportunity to have presented here this morning. You know, my heart is very close to local government, because local government is where can change people's lives. This, you know, I've been close enough to see the impact local government have on people. So therefore, local government is very important. And like you said, the tools are available across the country. Again, I'm going to stress that it's about people. It's about people's commitment to change. It's about people's commitment to the people that they are, or the communities that they serve. As I am currently busy in the new province. I'm applying the strategy. I'm going to apply the strategy within this province. And then I'll come back a year from now and then see whether it yielded the results that the Western Cape achieved. So I will keep you informed as I'm working in this province to try and get to where other provinces are at. Thank you very much.
Doc?
Great, thanks, thanks, Zolani. Bazil, thanks very much. Again, excellent presentation. And Zolani and Dan, thanks for having me on as a participant. Yeah, my closing remark is simple, really. You know, for my sins, when I when I did my PhD in economics, one of my fascinations was with institutional development. How do institutions evolve? How do we ensure that they actually grow and mature in a way that serves citizens, rather than act as conduits for rent seeking and so on? Now, there's a super definition of institutions by a game theorist called Avner Greif, and he says institutions are the social systems, the norms, the beliefs, the values, and the culture that motivate regular human behavior. So institutions are not only organizations, though organizations are institutions as well. Institutions actually have this more intangible element to them as well. And so when we talk about enhancing or improving institutional capacity, it's got to be about shifting norms and beliefs and values in the direction of ethical leadership and capable leadership that can actually ensure that the right systems and processes are put in place to ensure effective service delivery. And so my parting kind of comment here is that, as the notes giving context to this meeting indicated, there can be, in a sense, too much focus on finance. You've got to get your finances right, but in and of themselves, that's not going to work. What you need is leadership that has integrity and competence, where there's accountability, transparency, and fairness. I craft these principles in King 4. Those things have to be present so that you build institutions and enable resources to be utilized to deliver services effectively. And ultimately, as Bazil rightly said, local governance is where people actually feel what governance is. In many other aspects, governance can feel like a very ethereal concept. But at the local level, you know what it is when your water doesn't flow or your potholes don't get fixed. You also know what it is when things work, because you actually feel proud to live in a place that's clean and functional and well managed, where you feel that public resources are actually being utilized to create public value. And that's what we want to see. I was very encouraged to see that. And Bazil, I'm very encouraged to hear that you are working hard to transpose what you've learned and implemented in the Western Cape and taking that elsewhere. It can be done. We all are in this together. We want a country that works, where our children and grandchildren are actually going to live valuable lives. So yeah, it's just very encouraging to know that there are these initiatives going on. So kudos to you, and Zelani, Dan, thanks again.
No, thanks once more to both of you, Doc and Bazil. And again, these, for me, are empowering sessions, because Bazil also indicated that when you were referring to the attendance of these workshops and conferences, to say, if you go to that platform and then you don't learn something new, then there must be something wrong, because there is continuous learning that takes place. On that note, let me also thank our audience. You've been great since we started. And as we close this particular year, we are planning for the next year. We will be taking some of these, Doc, Bazil, to 2024 on how do we then even elevate the conversations? How do we bring the stakeholders to the table to ensure that we co-create the solutions to the challenges that we are faced with? Dan and team at Future Cities Africa, without you, my brother, we will not have gone this far. Thanks a lot for the support, the coordination, your ideas, because that type of collaboration, that type of teamwork, that's what has delivered these webinars that we had this year. And as we are already engaging about 2024, I believe 2024 will be a great year as well. And also to our team at Municipal Edge, your inputs are valuable. And again, like as I've made to the team at Future Cities Africa. Without you, your contribution, your support, your pushing, we could not have come this far in terms of the program that we planned this year. And of course, lastly, the stakeholders that we work with, and I'll mention a few, your Chartered Government Finance Audit and Risk Officers, SIGFARO, South African Local Government Association, SALGA, Chartered Institute of Audit Governance, Leadership and Oversight, CIAGOL SA. We have had National Treasury in this platform this year as one of our contributors. We have had the National Department of Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation. We have had COGTA, which is the Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs. Also the institutions of higher learning that continuously contribute towards what we collectively want to achieve for our local government, for our government. We at Municipal Edge and Future Cities Africa, we say thank you. And as we close this year, may you have a restful time, an enjoyable time, but most importantly, to reflect on what is it that we need to do better or even more in the new year, which is 2024, in order to transform our municipalities. On that note, it's goodbye from my side until we engage again in 2024. Have lovely holidays and enjoy your time. Thanks a lot.